one of the other things I learned in Afghanistan was that when you train a man, you've just trained a man. But when you train a woman, the woman goes home and trains her kids, and trains her spouse, and trains her community. And I think that is true in every community.
Welcome to the Legacy Project. My name is Jim Copple, president of the Servant Forge Foundation. We're an organization committed to leadership development with a specific focus on service. This podcast and its related activities are about sharing the legacy we have inherited and discussing the legacy we still want to create. Legacy is more than cars, houses, boats, and material possessions that we want to leave to the next generation. Rather, legacy is about core values and beliefs that we inherited from a previous generation. They are the values that shaped us and defined us. Legacy is also about the values we develop or create that can be passed on or shared with the next generation. We will interview people from various backgrounds and walks of life. Some are famous, some, well, maybe not so famous, and others are simply our neighbors, our friends, people who live ordinary lives doing extraordinary things. Become part of this project by being intentional about legacy, more than just memories, but principles that have guided our lives and shaped our decisions. What is the legacy you choose to create? That's what we want to discover. Well, this is Jim Copple with the Legacy Project, and we are interviewing today Josephine Powers, a good friend, fellow sailor, and a veteran, a volunteer. She has had so many different roles, and she has had an interesting life. And we are very fortunate to have you with us, Joe. Thanks for being a part of the Legacy Project.
Thank you for inviting me, Jim. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. So, Joe, the Legacy Project is about capturing those values and those principles that influenced us, and also the values that we want to share and influence others. Tell me a little bit about your background. Where are you from? Where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Anchorage, Alaska. My parents were in the military, and we were raised all around the United States. My maiden name is Ibe, so we were called the Ibe tribe. So military families tend to be pretty tight because you move, and so it's just you and your family.
Mm-hmm. How many siblings did you have?
I have two sisters, and I'm right in the middle of them, and the youngest is a boy.
Oh, okay, great. So you were born in Anchorage. Was your father in the Air Force, or was...
He was in the Air Force, and I was born 10 days before the Alaskan earthquake, so I like to say that I caused the earthquake. Here I am.
Up. You shook things up.
Yes.
How long did you live in Anchorage?
We moved when I was 4. My parents drove, I forget what it's called, the Alaskan Pipeline.
Yeah.
And they drove back to Michigan, I believe. You know, you can track the travel by where the kids were dropped in each state.
That's great. And so was your father career Air Force, or?
He was career. He left in 1972. They wanted, if I remember correctly, they wanted to send him to Korea, and he did not want to go. So he retired from the Air Force near my mother's family. My mom wanted to move back to her family because of life. She wanted us to live with real people and learn from family. They weren't the most perfect family, and I did learn a lot. They were into a lot of drugs. There was alcoholism. My father's an alcoholic. Part of the most imperfect family that we all of us come from somewhere along down the line. But it was good to learn all those lessons with family. You can't beat that.
Yeah. What kind of lessons did you learn?
Well, the two things that my parents, I feel, taught us is unconditional love. And that occurred when I was a little girl, and my father came home drunk and caused a scene, and feelings were hurt, loud noises happened. And my mom was teaching us that there was a God and that God loves us. And so I asked the question, well, does he love Dad? And she says, yes, of course he does. And so I thought, well, geez, if God could love Dad, then so can I. And had he not been an alcoholic and had all that side of life, then I don't know as if I could have learned that lesson as solidly as I learned it. The second thing that they taught all of us was to be held responsible for our actions, both good and bad. And so we were both good and bad. And I'm a very all four of us, it's the only quality we all have together, is that we're all very responsible people running our own lives, raising responsible children. And I value those two lessons.
So did you go to high school in Michigan?
I did. They settled into the 30 miles north of Detroit in a little suburb called Harrison Township. We were raised next to aunts and uncles and grandparents. I created a best friend in 6th grade. She's still my best friend to this day. She taught me to speak up and for myself, whereas I tended to be, my mom called me a wallflower growing up. I would just sit and watch the insanity. And I would just listen and learn. And my girlfriend is like, no, you need to participate. You need to speak up. And that's still something that I struggle with today. But, she changed my life with that lesson.
Yeah. So what were your favorite subjects in high school?
Well, one of the things I wanted to do, I didn't look at high school like that. I looked at high school as a route to my future. My father always said at the age of 18, everybody's out the door. I did my part. Now it's time for you guys to go do your part. And so I knew that 18, I'm out the door. So I looked at high school of what classes did I need to take to set me up for success. So I took a lot of English classes because I wasn't very good, because we moved a lot. So there was pockets of information I missed. So I took a lot of English classes, and there was a gym class. It's called Advanced Gym. And I thought, oh, I'm not an athlete. I want to go to the Air Force Academy. I need to become an athlete. I need to become a leader. So I started speaking up, with my girlfriend's help, and tried to attempt to get into this advanced gym class. So way back when, of course, everybody stood in lines to register for their classes for the next semester. And the lady behind the little table wouldn't let me sign up for advanced gym. And I said, why? I've got plans. This is the only thing that's going to get me there. And she says, well, you're not a boy. That class is only for boys. And so what I realized is that was a class for the football players out of season. It was to keep them in shape. So I said, well, I want to talk to your supervisor. I really need this class. And the class description doesn't say you had to be a boy. So I want to talk to your supervisor. So the principal came over and said, Josephine, you cannot take this class. It is not meant for girls. And so I told them I had plans, and, I kind of teared up a little bit, but I just stood my ground. And I said, how else is this high school going to prepare me to become what I want to become? And he must have had a moment there, because I was the first girl to go into that class, and it was very uncomfortable, but I learned how to throw a football and do push-ups and weightlifting and run and do tumbling, and it was great. I did it for 2 years. And after that, women were allowed, or girls were allowed in that class.
Wow. So you paved the way for that class. Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. So you graduate from high school. What did you do? Did you go to school, college, or did you go into the Air Force? I knew you.
Both. I actually, I joined college, community college in law enforcement, which I loved. And I thought, well, before I spend all my money on a career path that I think I want, maybe I should join the military to see, because that's only 4 years. It's not the cost of a 4-year, or 2-year college at that point. But when I was in high school, I have to go back a little bit. When I was in high school, I was not accepted into the Air Force Academy like I wanted to be. And so I became very depressed. It was my last year in high school. And I started doing very poorly in school. And the counselor pulled me down into counseling. I didn't even know our high school had counselors. I mean, who are these people? I don't even remember if it was a male or a female. But they called me in and talked to me about what was going on. And I told them that, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I spent since sixth grade, my, entire upbringing trying to get into the Air Force Academy. Now it's not possible. I did not get the, I forget what it's called. I did
congressional recommendation. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So she says, well, listen, you only have a couple more months of high school. You need to graduate from high school. So just start doing your homework and we'll figure things out. Well, somehow she came up with this Kiwanis sponsored law enforcement camp. And somehow I won this scholarship, which they typically did not give seniors. They typically gave it to juniors. So I accepted the gift. I'd never won anything before in my life. And I went to this law enforcement camp for a week. And the Kiwanis paid my way. I didn't know who Kiwanis were. And so I went and I absolutely fell in love with law enforcement. They had city police officers there, township police officers, deputy sheriffs, and of course, state police. And because I live in Michigan, it was the Michigan State Police. And I had got my eyes set on the Michigan State Police. So I decided to go to law enforcement community college, or take law enforcement in community college. And then I decided to join the military just to make sure that that's what I wanted to do. And I did it all at the same time. And when I turned 21, I put in my application. When I turned 22, I was in recruit school and put my college aside for a couple of semesters, but I was still in the Air Force, Air National Guard. So that was all part-time. And so I did it all.
So what did you do in the Air Force?
Well, when I first joined, it was law enforcement. It was Air Force law enforcement, and I did a little bit of security work, which means that you stand by the aircraft, and then you're not using your brain when you're just standing there protecting property and people. So I decided to move over to life support technician. And in our unit, we had the F-4 fighter pilots. So I went and got trained on how to take care of all their personal equipment. So we would fix and repair all of their masks, their helmets, their G-suits, their survival kit, and just things like that. And so that was really neat because I'm very mechanically inclined. And I just really enjoyed that.
Where did you serve?
I served at Selfridge Air National Guard Base. When we first arrived in Michigan, it was Selfridge Air Force Base. And by the time my father retired, it was an Air National Guard base. And so when I was older, I said, Dad, how come we always arrived at an Air Force base, but when we left, it was Air National Guard base? And he said that's what his job was. He was part of the administrative crew that went from base to base, bringing it down from an active duty base down to a guard base. Ah. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that growing up.
Yeah. So you didn't really have a lot of conversations about his job while he was doing his job.
No, he said he was very good at paperwork, and that's just what he settled into. He joined the Air Force because he lived in the ghettos of, the city just left my brain. Mm-hmm.
Was it in Michigan?
No, it was in Pennsylvania. I don't know.
It'll come to you. Don't worry about it.
Sorry.
You're starting to suffer from my disease, forgetting names. What did you learn from the military, from being in the military? What were your some takeaways for you?
I learned that people can tell me what to do, but I am who I am inside. Mm-hmm. So, and there's also a point where I will take your order and I will do it with, great vim and vigor and professionalism. But wrong is wrong, and I won't go past that. And I learned that with my siblings. That's one of the biggest lessons I learned with my siblings. So I applied that no matter where I go.
Yeah. That's a huge takeaway. Yeah. So I have this recollection that you were in Iraq or Afghanistan at some point in your life, in your career.
Yes, I was. So I was in the Guard. I joined the state police. I met my husband, got married. He had 2 kids from a first marriage. We had one together. We actually semi-adopted a 4th kid. We finished raising somebody else's child. And then when all my kids grew up and left the house, because during that time I became a stay-at-home mom. When they left to go to college, I thought, well, I'm finishing my college education that I started 25 years ago. So that's what I did. I got my bachelor's. And then I handed in my last report on March 31st. So April 1st, I'm at the computer looking for a job and couldn't find one. And so I called Howard about 1:00 in the afternoon crying that there's no jobs out there for old people. And what am I going to do? And woe's me. And he says, oh, there's so many jobs out there. He said, I just got an email today with 250 jobs out there. So he sent me the email. Well, one of the very last job applications on this email was for a position, a female trainer that had military experience, that had policing experience, that had instructor development experience, which I did, and was willing to travel. And I'm like, wow. And we were supposed to train women. And I said, perfect. And then I saw the location and it said training Afghan women in Afghanistan. And I said, I'm in. So I told Howard what I would like to do, and he's thought for a moment and he says, well, you've supported all of your children, myself included, on anything we wanted to do, so we will definitely support you. But you really have to go to Afghanistan. And I said, yes, I'm being called to Afghanistan. I felt it was a calling. I felt like for the first time, my entire life made sense. And so I went to Afghanistan and I participated in the training of the Afghan women, and it was an amazing experience, good and bad.
How long were you there?
I was there 1.5 years.
Wow.
And we got a lot of training done. When I first got there, the training wasn't active for a lot of different reasons. And so I had to get it started, which wasn't my job, but I learned to hate that phrase, stay in your lane, because when there's, 10 lanes of travel and you have to go through all 10 lanes to get, to your goal, then you can't stay in your lane. You have to, traverse, which I did.
Is that a commentary on you as a woman or as a leader? What is, when you say you're being asked to stay in your lane, is it because of the cultural norms that try to keep people limited in what they do, or?
That's a really good question, Jim. I'm not quite sure what they meant by that because I really never asked. But when I was over in Afghanistan, I realized that I somehow went from a person called Josephine, who just happened to be a female, that all of a sudden I was identified as a female whose name was Josephine. That's a big difference. So, and it was both the U.S. military, it was all of the other foreign military people and police that I dealt with. It had to do with the Afghans. It had to do with the Afghan women. So I had to overcome gender. I had to overcome religion. I had to overcome social status. I had to overcome civilian versus military. I had to overcome my stature. I'm about 5'4", and when I went to Afghanistan, I dropped a lot of weight and ended up about 125, 130 pounds of rock solid muscle, because what else was there to do but lift weights, right? So a lot of men thought that they could intimidate me or get me to do things that I did not want to do. Again, just simply because I was little.
That's a huge takeaway. What did that year and a half do for you in terms of your attitudes, your beliefs, your thinking? I mean, it was interesting as you were going through that litany of titles or labels that so much of what you were going through in that period was defined by labels, not by who you were as a person. And that had to be tough.
You know, I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because nobody knew who I was. We were trying to create something new. I was given the opportunity. That's not right. I created opportunities to go talk to the Afghan colonels and generals to get the program started. No matter who I was talking to or what I was experiencing, I filtered everything through. I was there to train the Afghan women, period. It didn't matter what happened or what somebody said to me or being uncomfortable or not having a toilet or having to sleep in a tent with other men or not having the right food or whatever. And what I mean by right food is food was really hard for me to find when I was on the U.S. military bases because I do not eat wheat. And most Americans do eat wheat, or the food is coated in wheat. And so that's another reason why I lost so much weight, as I just didn't have enough food. But anyway, I just put up with everything because I was there. I felt I was there as a calling to use my past experiences and my past job titles to give something to Afghan women and the men and their community that has never been done before. And so I had to have lots of conversations because I had to first figure out why the Afghan women were not being trained. And so I figured out how to get to the people, the decision makers. And I asked them, and they were very honest. They said, first of all, Afghan women, problems. Wherever women are, there are problems. And so I said, okay. And they said, plus, we don't want you to Americanize our women because that would be very bad. And I said, oh, I agree. And so I listened to all their concerns. And I said, what do you say that I bring my experiences from halfway across the world to your culture? And so we'll do things your way. But first of all, can we agree that your way is not working? Because if it was working, the women would be trained. And they said, yes, I agree that our way is not working. I said, okay, so let's do it your way. But what we'll do is we just tweak it a little bit by just having me be here, which is different because I've never been here before. So there's a difference. So let's use that difference and let's just tweak the program ever so slightly so that we can make it work. Because the Afghan men, his whole goal is to take care of their women. But you're not taking care of the women of the community very well if you don't have women police officers, because a woman will not go and talk to another woman if there's a problem. So they understood that they had to have women on their police department, but they had to be trained in a very specific way. And so what I did was I gained agreement that we would do it their way because they were the cultural experts and I was just a difference. And maybe that difference could make it work. So that's what we did. And I told them as the final nail in, not a coffin, but maybe a wall, is I talked to the generals and I said, do you understand that if we can make this work where it's never worked before, that it's not my name to go down in the history books of success. It will be your name to go down in the history books, that you got this done, that you got this started. And so they were like, we must get these women trained. I said, okay, let's get started. And there were lots and lots and lots of problems. And as each problem would come, we would manage it and we would go to the next issue. Hmm. And I have lots of stories like those.
Were you the only woman doing the training?
No, there was about 5 or 6 of us. Mm-hmm. We were all spread around. We went and to the women to get the training done. whereas the men would come to a training center, but women needed to go home every day at the end of the day to take care of their families and children. And then they would come first thing early in the morning, they would get their training and we'd send them home. And then they would come first thing in the morning. And by first thing in the morning, I'm talking they had to leave their house at 4:30 in the morning to get to the buses, because everything had to be done under dark so that their neighbors didn't know that they were leaving. There was a couple of bombings when I was there where some of the trainees, not at my camps when I was there, but at other camps, where the local townsmen would find out and they would bomb the pickup trucks that had the women in it and kill them.
Talk to me for a few moments. I mean, because this interview begs the question: as the United States has left Afghanistan, what are your concerns for the women that you worked with?
So the women are like nobody else I have ever met before. These women are so innocent, naive, and so willing, like children, to do things that they've never done before. Half of the women that came to us could not read or write. So the first hour of every day was reading and writing and arithmetic. They didn't even know their numbers, which I found stunning, because how do you go to market if you don't know your numbers? And my language assistant said that they would memorize that it's this coin for that item. So they have a remarkable ability to adapt, and they have a remarkable underground system that gets things done, because life will always continue no matter who's in charge or who thinks they're in charge. They will still continue to raise their children. The women that I met, all of them without fail, no matter what base I was at, got the bug of learning and curiosity, and I want to know more, and critical thinking skills. And I'm going to tell you one more story before I finally answer your question. Mm-hmm. At every base this occurred, but the first time it happened, I didn't know what was going on. The women would all come from different tribes. They're tribal in Afghanistan. So they would all come into the training base together. They didn't know each other because they're from different tribes. So eventually they would fight physically because they didn't know each other. Therefore, I don't like you because I don't know you. Therefore, I hate you. Therefore, I kill you. And it's literally that fast. And so the fight that occurred at the first base, one woman had scratched the other one right across her face. And their skin, keloids, it's just the type of skin they have. So for the rest of this young woman's life, she's going to have these scars lifted up, and she's got 3 of them across her face. And so I asked, what happened? And basically that's the story, is that they didn't like each other because they didn't know each other. So I had my language assistant, there were 30 women in our class. I had the language assistant bring them all together, and I put them in a circle, and I put him and the language assistant in the circle. And so I told them that I'm going to talk to them about differences. And I said, when you work for law enforcement, when you work for the members of your community, you are tasked to manage conflict and differences. And so let's say that the differences or the problem or the conflict is Yamin, who's standing in the center. And I said, now Yamin is standing right in front of me. So what I see is 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. That's the problem that I see. And I'm telling you that this is what I see. This is the conflict. This is the problem. The woman on the other side of the circle, she doesn't know what I'm talking about because she sees the back of the head. She doesn't understand what I am talking about, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. And so I said, when this happens, what you have to do is keep talking. And then you have to connect together. And I had everybody start holding hands. And then what I did was I shifted the circle ever so slightly. I said, because all of us have a piece of the pie, because everybody in between the two opposite ends of the spectrum has what they know based on what happened in their tribes. We all learned something slightly different. So we're all slightly different. But if we keep talking and working together, before you know it, you're turning around and now, oh, I see what you're talking about. Oh, it is the back of the head. Yeah, that is part of the problem. And everybody in between. And so when I did that, all of the women started crying. And I said, you mean, why are they crying? And he says, Josephine, they're crying because when you say that they need to work together, that they don't have to fear differences, they don't have to fear each other, they don't have to hate each other just because they don't know each other, that if they continue to work together, they can do greater things together than separate. They're crying because they've never heard that before. And they hear the truth in what you say. And I said, oh, okay, well, all right then. And this happened at every class. And I would say the same thing at every class. And every class, the ladies would cry at every class. So it was a cultural thing. So fast forward to today, and I see what's going on with the women. And the women will continue. They are strong. Some will die. Others will get educated. Others are making differences. Some will stay home. Some will go out and continue learning. But that's if there's one seed that I planted wherever I went, that was the seed. And I think that it will grow from there. One of the other things I learned in Afghanistan was that when you train a man, you've just trained a man. But when you train a woman, the woman goes home and trains her kids and trains her spouse and trains her community. And I think that is true in every community.
It's an interesting perspective. It's as if we planted a seed in the empowerment and education of women in Afghanistan that cannot be easily destroyed. It's going to in flesh in their children, in their relationships. They can't unlearn. Their behavior may be forced. They may be forced to modify their behavior, and their opportunities may be limited. But what they have learned in the past 20 years, not just from you, but from the whole enterprise of women empowerment in Afghanistan, it's as if that will not be destroyed. That's a powerful statement or insight.
I agree.
That's an amazing learning.
Thank you.
We're talking to Josephine Powers, volunteer, veteran, former law enforcement officer, former military officer, trainer, worked in Afghanistan for a year and a half. We're excited to have you here. Joe, talk to me for a few moments about the legacy you want to leave your children.
So I think I've already left my legacy. I've been thinking hard about that question. And I've already left it.
What is it?
Well, if I look at the word legacy in two different ways. First, as a noun. Legacy is typically known as a noun, right? Money or property after you die.
Right.
But in real life, I am the noun. I am the legacy. I have given them myself, my time, my love, my commitment to stand by them no matter what, my listening, my empathy. I've already given that to them, and it shows up in their adult lives. And then what I mean by that is that they're all running their own lives. Every single one of them is functional. They have a significant other who they love tremendously. They're working out their problems. One of the biggest things I taught all my children is that every day you wake up and there's going to be problems, nothing but problems and conflict. That's all there is. And then when one is done, you go off to the next one. So put a smile on your face and see what the problem is sitting at your front door and what you're going to do about it. And they've got it. They got it. Now, whether or not they are happy happy, I've taught them that that's up to them. I can't make them happy. I can't provide happiness for them. Happiness is found from within. Happiness and self-worth is their job. So when I look at legacy as an adjective, and the leaving legacy, that's when I shift over to, with great intention, I watch the manner in which I live my life. And that's my continued legacy. How am I still continuing to live my life? Because as you know, Jim, the older we get, the harder life is. Yeah. Some days it's really hard. So I watch my manner, and they're watching me. And they shake their heads some days. I work really hard at volunteering. I volunteer at a cat rescue. I know that's shocking to you. But there's something about a cat that really speaks to me. I think it's the independence, yet their desire to be loved at the same time. But if you don't love them in the right way, they smack you. So
just to be clear for our audience, Josephine loves cats. I hate cats. The only real source of tension in our relationship.
So those are my two legacies.
Well, let me ask you this. Those are great statements. What is the legacy you still want to create? I mean, we're getting older, but you're young. What is the legacy you still want to create?
So I have my first grandchild is going to be arriving in November. Mm-hmm. And so I'm assuming that whatever I have to give will come out with her. I'm not sure. You stumped me, Jim. You stumped me. I am a big believer. You know, when I was preparing for this and I was going back over my life, because I really, especially now, I try to live my life in the present as much as possible. And so I forget about the past. So when I was thinking about the past, I realized wherever I went, I was given a team builder award. I was the first and only female in the Michigan State Police Academy as a recruit to be given a team builder award. It's a highly coveted award in the Michigan State Police. When I went to Afghanistan, I was given a team builder award because I was able to pull teams of people together to work together to create something that we've never created before. Wherever I go, I'm pulling people together, whether it's my family through our political differences, which has been very difficult lately, or bringing strangers together and keeping us all focusing on our same goals, our same mission. And so I continue to do the same thing with my kids and with community, wherever I'm at, is managing the conflict, honoring people's differences, and keeping us all moving forward. As long as you're moving, even if you're standing in place and twitching, you're still moving, you're still alive. So let's keep moving. Let's just keep going.
So we all have symbols or icons in our life that my father gave me years ago. My father was in the Second World War, and he had a black box that he brought out of the military. Actually, he was in the Philippines. And it was actually a medic's box, something that kept supplies in. And he gave that to me. And I now keep that box. I put important things in it. You know, I went to Harvard for a while, and I put my grades from Harvard in that box. I put my ex-wedding ring from my ex-wife. I put a number of different icons or symbols that define who I am. What is an example of an icon or a symbol in your life that you look at that reminds you of who you are, where you've been, and where you want to go? It could be a painting, a picture. It could be any number of things.
I guess the biggest thing, an icon, I don't know if it's an icon, but The symbol that I look at every day are my hands.
Yeah.
It was interesting just to backtrack just a moment. A couple of years ago, when I came back from Afghanistan and I was trying to recreate my life and filing things away and putting things in their proper boxes and things like that. And I realized all of my medals and certificates and things that you were just talking about all went into a box. And it was just one of those nice banker boxes and it fit perfectly in there. And it was jam packed, but I could close that lid. So I was really happy. And then I looked at that box and I was just reminiscing of all the stuff. And then I realized box does not reflect who I am. It reflects where I've been. And that's pretty cool. But it's my hands that I treasure the most. One of the Italians on one of the bases took my hands and he looked at my hands and he said, "Oh, Josephine, you will work too hard. It shows up in your hands. You need to be nicer to yourself and enjoy your life a little bit more. I want you to be less hard on yourself. You work way too hard." And he said it again. It shows up in your hands. And so I thought about my hands that's just riddled with arthritis, scars, disease. And I realized he's right. I do work way too hard. But wherever I am and I'm working, I'm bringing my love, I'm bringing my empathy, and at a cost. And the cost visually shows up in my hands.
Last question. Stephen Covey wrote a book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the second habit, he talks about living with the end in mind. And he takes you through an exercise where you imagine if people were to attend your funeral today, what would they say? And then he asks you to reflect if you had the opportunity to put that funeral off by 10 years, what would you want people to say about you? And it may be the same if they would say today, but if you have 10 years, what would you want people to say about you? What would you want on that headstone that kind of summarizes who Josephine Powers is?
I would hope that they would say that Josephine lived with both her mind and her heart. And as battered and bruised as a heart can get, mine is there, and it will continue probably to get more scars, but there's still a lot more love in that battered old heart. As far as the mind goes, the older I get, the more murky my mind gets, but there's still so much more to learn. I just sometimes have a hard time getting it out the mouth. It gets stuck in there, but I'm still thinking it. So I would hope that they would have grasped that by now. I know that I befuddle people sometime because as loving as I am, I'm equally as, I hate to use the word, but harsh. And what I mean by harsh is I'm very blunt, and I don't mean to be negative or cruel or even destructive, farthest from the thing. But the older I get, the more I realize time is limited. Things need to be said. Stuff needs to be done. Life is not that hard. I'm not quite sure why we all continue to make it so hard. And then the final thing is fun. And that is there's so much fun to be had in the world. When I was younger and I said, Grandma, you're really, really old. And she was maybe about 60 at the time, right? And she's like, yes, Josephine. And I said, well, Grandma, what's the biggest lesson you learned in life? And she says, honey, there's not enough hours in a day to have as much fun as there is to have. Wow. Have fun, Josephine, have fun. So even through all of the world crises and, all the issues that we're all dealing with, there's still fun to be had, and not at the cost of somebody else, but just finding that joy. And I equate joy with fun.
We have been talking with Josephine Powers and a great conversation about legacy, the contribution she has made in so many different places, her work in Afghanistan, training women, police officers, her volunteerism here, her law enforcement background. Josephine, thank you. What a joy to have you on the Legacy Project.
Thank you, Jim. It was my pleasure.
To find out more information about this conversation and other Legacy podcast episodes, go to servantforge.org. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and consider leaving us a review. We want to hear from you. We want to get your ideas and your opinions. I have a new book that corresponds with the Legacy Project titled The Seeker, Bring Me the Horizon. You can find a copy of it on Amazon or your preferred book distributor. The book corresponds closely with these podcasts. The podcast episode was produced by Matt Erickson and edited by Carissa Erickson. The music is by David Hyde. Please look for a new episode of our podcast coming out soon. Remember, you have inherited a great legacy. You have an opportunity to create a great legacy. Engage your past to build a future.